It was small, barely a pinprick, but in the overwhelming dark, it was unmistakable. John's heart sank. He knew what was coming, but his mind refused to fully grasp it. It was as if he was trapped in a loop, a sickening spiral from which there was no escape. "No," he whispered, his voice hoarse, cracking from the dryness in his throat. "No, this can't be happening." But it was happening, and deep down, he knew it. The ground beneath him trembled as he stumbled toward the red glow, his steps faltering and unsteady. The jagged rocks and twisted formations that had been revealed to him earlier by the glow now reappeared in the same dreadful sequence, like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. Each step brought him closer to the valley, the descent into that nightmarish landscape that he had already experienced, yet could not escape. The same grotesque scene greeted him as he reached the valley floor, twisted figures in torment, chained to the rocks, suspended in endless agony. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur, the acrid stench of burning flesh. The lava pits bubbled and spat, casting their sickly light across the landscape. And once again, the high-pitched scream echoed across the valley, tearing through the silence like a blade. John's stomach lurched as he turned to face the source of the scream. The figure at the edge of the lava pool was there, just as before, its charred skin hanging in strips, its face contorted in a mask of unimaginable pain. It was the same scene, playing out exactly as it had before, and he could do nothing to stop it. The figure clawed at its face, then collapsed into the molten pool with a final despairing wail. John's knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the stone, his hands covering his ears in a futile attempt to block out the sound. It was too much, the horror of it all, the crushing realization that this was his reality now. He had been condemned to this nightmare, and there was no waking up, no escaping from the endless torment. He barely registered the creature's approach until it was towering over him once more. The massive figure, with its sinewy muscles, mottled skin, and glowing eyes, was a horrific sight. John knew what it would say, knew the words that would drip from its lips like venom, yet he couldn't bring himself to move, to fight, or even to scream. "Welcome, sinner," the creature hissed, just as it had before. "You have entered the domain of the damned. There is no escape, no salvation. You are ours for eternity." The words hit him like a sledgehammer, knocking the wind from his lungs. The creature's presence, its sheer malevolence, was overwhelming. John's body trembled as the creature's voice rumbled through the air, vibrating through his bones. "Why?" John managed to croak, his voice barely more than a whisper, choked with despair. "Why am I here? What did I do?" The creature's eyes gleamed with a sinister light, its jagged teeth bared in a cruel smile. "You know why," it growled, the words echoing in John's mind like a curse. "All who come here know. You have sinned, mortal, and now you will suffer for all eternity." "No," John whispered, shaking his head as he backed away, crawling on his hands and knees over the sharp, uneven stones. The pain barely registered as he moved, his mind too consumed with the horror of his situation. I don't remember what I did." The creature watched him with a mocking expression, its massive arms crossed over its broad chest. "Denial will not save you," it rumbled, taking a step closer. The ground trembled beneath its weight, sending small rocks tumbling down the valley slopes. "You cannot escape your guilt. It will follow you, hound you, until you accept the truth." John shook his head more violently, his heart hammering in his chest. "I don't remember," he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "I don't remember anything. What did I do? Why can't I remember?" The creature knelt down beside him, its foul breath hot against John's face as it leaned in close. "The mind protects itself," it said, its voice a low, sinister whisper. "The memory of your sin is too much for you to bear, but it will come back to you. In time, you cannot hide from it forever." With a sudden, bone-crushing grip, the creature seized John by the arm and hoisted him to his feet. John cried out in pain as the creature's claws dug into his flesh, the heat from its body scorching him. It dragged him across the valley, toward the same iron gate set into the mountain. "No, please, no," John begged, struggling against the creature's hold, but it was useless. The creature was too strong, and his resistance only seemed to amuse it. It laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that shook the very air around them. The gate groaned open as they approached, the same grotesque carvings leering down at him, their twisted faces frozen in expressions of eternal agony. Beyond the gate, the same cavernous chamber waited, filled with thick, choking smoke and lined with glowing embers that pulsed with a sickly light. As they entered the chamber, John's eyes were drawn to the stone altar at its center. His heart sank as he saw the figure writhing in agony upon it, bound in glowing red-hot chains. It was him, again, his own face staring back at him, twisted in pain and terror. The creature threw him down beside the altar, just as it had before. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs, and he lay there gasping, his vision swimming. He could feel the heat of the chains, hear the sizzle of flesh, and smell the acrid stench of burning skin. It was all happening again, just as before, but this time something was different. As he looked up at the figure on the altar, at himself, he felt a flicker of recognition, a small crack in the wall his mind had built around the truth. Memories began to surface, hazy and fragmented, but undeniable. The screech of tires, the blinding headlights, the sickening crunch of metal, and then the screams. His screams, her screams. "No," John whispered, his voice trembling as the memories came flooding back, a torrent of guilt and shame that threatened to drown him. "No, it wasn't my fault. It wasn't." But the truth was there, staring him in the face. The accident, the car swerving out of control, the innocent woman crossing the street, the moment of impact. The horror as he watched her body crumple under the force of the collision, the blood pooling on the asphalt, her eyes wide with fear and pain. The look on her face as she realized she was dying. John had killed her. The realization hit him like a physical blow, knocking the wind from his lungs, filling his chest with a crushing weight of guilt and despair. The creature's words echoed in his mind. You cannot escape your guilt. He couldn't run from it, couldn't hide. This was his sin, his crime, and he had to face it. The creature watched him, its cruel smile widening as it saw the truth dawn in his eyes. "You remember now, don't you?" it whispered, its voice filled with satisfaction. "You took a life, and now you will pay the price." John's body shook with sobs as the full weight of his guilt settled over him, crushing him under its immense pressure. He had killed an innocent woman, taken her life in a moment of carelessness, and now he was damned. There would be no redemption, no forgiveness. This was his eternity, an endless cycle of torment, reliving his sin, his guilt over and over again. The creature raised its massive hand, its claws gleaming in the dim light of the chamber. John didn't resist this time. He didn't fight or struggle. He couldn't. The guilt was too much to bear, and he knew he deserved whatever punishment was coming. The creature's claws descended, slicing through the air with a sound like a whip crack. John braced himself for the pain, the agony that he knew was coming. But as the claws reached him, there was no pain, no physical sensation at all. Instead, his mind exploded with memories, every detail of the accident, every moment of that night, playing out in excruciating detail. The screams, her screams and his. The guilt washed over him in waves, drowning him in despair. He couldn't escape it, couldn't hide from it. It was all-consuming, suffocating, and there was no end in sight. When the memories finally subsided, John found himself back on the cold, rough stone floor, curled up in a ball, shaking uncontrollably. The creature was gone, the chamber was silent, but the guilt remained, gnawing at him like a ravenous beast. He knew now that this was his hell, an endless cycle of torment, reliving the worst moment of his life, the moment of his greatest sin, over and over again. There would be no escape, no reprieve. He was trapped here, in this nightmarish landscape forever. And as the darkness closed in around him once more, as the oppressive silence pressed down on him from all sides, John realized that this was only the beginning. The cycle would start again, and he would wake up, once more, in the cold, rough stone, with no memory of what had come before. He would rise, he would walk toward the glow, and he would relive the nightmare all over again, forever. The realization broke him, and as his sanity unraveled, John's screams joined the chorus of the damned, echoing through the endless void of hell. Thank you for joining me this evening. Before you go, make sure you subscribe and leave a like. If you have an idea for a short, scary story, leave it in the comments below. See you at the next campfire.